You've been burned by people who seemed trustworthy until they stabbed you in the back, and you're starting to question your ability to judge anyone's character. You find yourself constantly second-guessing people's motives, wondering if that helpful colleague has ulterior motives, or if your boss's praise comes with hidden strings attached. I am Sun Tzu, and in the deadly world of ancient Chinese warfare, reading false intentions meant the difference between victory and annihilation. Those who couldn't see through deception didn't live to fight another day. The secrets I'll share about unveiling people's true intentions will give you the power to see past every mask, every false smile, and every hidden agenda before they can be used against you. What I learned in the most treacherous courts and battlefields of ancient China, where one misread intention could cost you your life, will protect you from the deception and manipulation that surrounds you every day. Start by liking this video, subscribing for more life-changing insights, and telling me in the comments where you're watching from. Let's see how far this wisdom needs to travel to reach those ready to see the truth. Let me tell you about the moment that changed everything I thought I knew about human nature. I was young then, perhaps too eager to prove myself worthy of the trust placed in me by my Lord. The enemy we faced was formidable, their formations precise, their strategy predictable. I could read their movements like characters written on silk. But it was not the enemy across the battlefield who nearly destroyed me. His name was General Wei, and he had served alongside my father. When I spoke, he listened with the attention of a devoted student. When I strategized, he nodded with approval and offered suggestions that seemed to strengthen my plans. For months, I believed I had found not just an ally, but a mentor who genuinely cared for my success. I was a fool. The night before what should have been our greatest victory, I discovered Wei hunched over a map in his tent. But it was not our battle plan he studied. In his hands was a detailed layout of our camp, marked with the positions of our supply lines, our weakest defensive points, and the location of my personal quarters. Beside him sat a messenger I had never seen before, wearing the colors of our enemy beneath a hastily thrown cloak. I watched from the shadows as Wei traced routes with his finger, explaining in whispered tones how our forces could be divided and conquered. The very strategies I had shared with him in confidence, believing him to be my trusted advisor, were being handed to those who sought to destroy us. But what shattered me was not just the betrayal, it was the casual nature of it. He spoke of my death as if discussing the weather, calculating the best moment to strike when I would be most vulnerable. That bronze cup Wei drank from each evening, the one he claimed was blessed by his ancestors, I realized then it might as well have been filled with poison, for his intentions were far more deadly than any substance. In that moment, I understood that I had been reading the wrong battlefield entirely. I could anticipate every move of an enemy general I had never met, yet I had been completely blind to the treachery of a man who sat beside me at every war council. The revelation was devastating, but it was also illuminating. I realized that my entire approach to strategy had been incomplete. I had mastered the art of warfare, but I had neglected the most crucial element, the human heart. That night, I did not sleep. Instead, I reflected on every interaction I had shared with Wei, searching for the signs I had missed. They were there, scattered like breadcrumbs, along the path of our acquaintance. The questions that probed too deeply into sensitive matters, the suggestions that subtly weakened our positioning, the way his eyes would dart away when he spoke of loyalty and honor. I had been so focused on external enemies that I had left myself defenseless against the enemy within. From that moment forward, I understood that true strategy begins not with studying your opponent's army, but with understanding the hearts and minds of every person around you. The battlefield extends far beyond what the eye can see. It exists in every conversation, every glance, every gesture. This betrayal taught me that survival required a new kind of vigilance. I had to learn to read not just tactical formations, but human formations. I had to understand not just military positioning, but emotional positioning. Most importantly, I had to accept that in the complex world of human relationships, everyone, even those closest to you, carries the potential for both loyalty and betrayal. That was the night I began developing what would become my greatest strategic advantage, the ability to see through the masks that people wear and understand their true intentions before they act upon them. After Wei's betrayal, I became obsessed with understanding why people conceal their true intentions. I spent years observing everyone around me, soldiers, nobles, merchants, servants, even my own family members. What I discovered changed my understanding of human nature forever. Picture a double-sided bronze mirror, polished to perfection. From one angle, it shows you exactly what you expect to see. Turn it slightly, and an entirely different reflection appears. This is humanity. Every person carries within them both the face they show the world and the face they keep hidden, even from themselves. Through thousands of interactions across every level of society, I identified three fundamental forces that drive people to hide their true nature. Understanding these forces became the foundation of everything I would later teach about strategy and human relations. The first force is survival. Deep in the ancient part of our minds lives the knowledge that complete honesty can be dangerous. I watched a young courtier speak truthfully about a nobleman's incompetence, and within a week he had vanished from court entirely. People learn quickly that certain truths are not welcome, and they adapt by developing alternate versions of themselves, versions that are safer to present to the world. In my own court, I observed how officials would present entirely different perspectives depending on who was listening. With the king, they emphasized loyalty and traditional values. With younger nobles, they spoke of innovation and change. With foreign ambassadors, they projected strength and unity. None of these were lies exactly, but neither were they complete truths. They were survival strategies. The second force is advantage. People conceal their intentions because revelation would cost them opportunities. I once knew a merchant who built his reputation on fairness and honest dealing. Yet I watched him carefully study his customers, adjusting his prices based on their apparent wealth and desperation. He never lied about his goods, but he certainly never revealed his pricing. Strategy. His public persona of fairness masked a calculating mind that maximized profit from every transaction. This is not necessarily evil. It is human nature seeking advantage within the constraints of social acceptability. People learn to present themselves in ways that open doors rather than close them. A general might emphasize his compassion when seeking civilian support, then emphasize his ruthlessness when deterring enemies. Both aspects exist within him, but he reveals each only when it serves his purposes. The third force is fear, specifically the fear of rejection and isolation. Humans are social creatures who require acceptance to thrive. I observed how people would suppress aspects of their personality that might make them outcasts. A soldier might hide his love of poetry to maintain his warrior image. A nobleman might conceal his doubts about tradition to avoid being labeled a radical. Even in my own life, I found myself presenting different aspects of my character to different audiences. With my generals, I emphasized strategy and tactical thinking. With scholars, I explored philosophy and the deeper meanings of conflict. With common soldiers, I showed the practical leader they needed to follow into battle. All of these were authentic parts of who I was, yet none represented my complete nature. What fascinated me most was discovering that even good people, those with noble intentions and pure hearts, engage in this concealment. A loving parent might hide their own fears to appear strong for their children. A dedicated teacher might conceal their uncertainty to maintain their students' confidence. These are not deceptions born of malice, but necessary adaptations to complex social realities. The breakthrough in my understanding came when I realized that everyone operates with both a public agenda and a private agenda. the public agenda, is what they're willing to share, their stated goals, expressed values, and declared intentions. The private agenda consists of their deeper motivations, personal fears, hidden desires, and secret strategies. The gap between these two agendas is where deception lives, but it's also where truth can be found. By learning to identify this gap and understand what fills it, I developed the ability to predict behavior, anticipate challenges, and navigate relationships with unprecedented effectiveness. This understanding became my greatest strategic weapon. But it also taught me compassion. Once you understand why people hide their true nature, you can approach them with both wisdom and empathy, seeing past their masks to the complex human beings beneath. The lesson that transformed my understanding of human nature came during negotiations with General Liu, commander of a rival faction who controlled the mountain passes we desperately needed. He arrived at our meeting with great ceremony, speaking eloquently of peace, mutual benefit, and his desire to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. "Master Sun," he said, his voice resonating with apparent sincerity, "I have come to forge an alliance that will benefit both our peoples. War serves no one when prosperity through cooperation is possible." His words were beautiful, his manner diplomatic, and his proposals seemingly generous. A less experienced commander might have been convinced, but while Liu spoke of peace, I watched what he did. His advance scouts had positioned themselves on the high ground overlooking our negotiation site, not for protection, but for tactical advantage. His supply trains, which should have been moving toward winter quarters, were instead being repositioned closer to our borders. Most telling of all, his personal bodyguard carried weapons designed for close combat, not the ceremonial arms appropriate for peaceful negotiations. Like a war drum that makes no sound, Liu's actions spoke a language entirely different from his words. Within a week, he launched a surprise attack on our supply lines, exactly as his positioning had indicated he would. I was ready. This experience taught me the first and most crucial principle of reading intentions. Observe actions, not words. Words are the tools of conscious deception, but actions reveal unconscious truth. People can control what they say much more easily than they can control what they do. I developed a three-part observation system that served me throughout my career. First, watch for the gap between stated intentions and actual preparation. If someone claims they want peace but prepares for war, their actions reveal their true intentions. If a colleague speaks of collaboration while positioning themselves to take credit, their behavior exposes their real agenda. Second, track patterns over time rather than focusing on isolated incidents. A single contradictory action might be meaningless, but a pattern of behavior that contradicts stated intentions reveals character. I once observed a court official who consistently spoke of fiscal responsibility while gradually increasing his personal expenditures. The pattern revealed his true priorities long before his corruption became obvious to others. Third, pay attention to what people do when they think no one is watching. Their unconscious actions, the choices they make without deliberation, reveal their authentic nature more clearly than any conscious performance. I learned to position myself where I could observe these unguarded moments, not through spying, but through strategic presence and timing. The timing element proved crucial. People maintain their conscious facade only as long as they believe. It's necessary. Watch someone long enough, and eventually their guard will drop. During extended negotiations, I would pay closest attention during breaks, transitions, and moments of apparent casualness. These were when true intentions surfaced. In modern contexts, this principle applies universally. Watch how potential business partners treat service staff when they think you're not paying attention. Observe whether colleagues follow through on small commitments when there's no immediate benefit to them. Notice if someone's resource allocation matches their stated priorities. The key insight is that our unconscious actions flow directly from our true intentions, while our words often serve strategic purposes that may have nothing to do with what we actually plan to do. Actions require resources, time, and energy, investments that people make based on their genuine beliefs about what matters most. I learned to read these action patterns like a language. Preparation reveals intention. Resource allocation reveals priorities. Consistent behavior reveals character. And the gap between what people say and what they do reveals the truth about their actual agenda. This principle alone transformed my effectiveness as a strategist and leader, giving me insights that others missed, because they listened only to words while I watched the silent but truthful language of actions. During a crucial diplomatic meeting with the ambassador from the Northern Kingdom, I made a discovery that would revolutionize my understanding of human nature. Ambassador Chen was a master of courtly speech, his words carefully chosen, and his manner impeccably controlled. But his eyes told a completely different story. We were negotiating a trade agreement that would determine the flow of weapons and supplies for the coming season. Chen spoke with confidence about his kingdom's abundant resources and their eagerness to establish lasting partnerships. Yet as he detailed their generous offers, I noticed something peculiar. Each time he mentioned specific quantities or timelines, his eyes would dart quickly to the left and then down, a movement so brief that most would miss it entirely. This tiny gesture, repeated throughout our conversation, revealed what his words concealed: uncertainty, perhaps even deception, about his kingdom's actual capabilities. Like an eagle's eye carved in jade, I had developed the ability to see what others missed, to catch the micro-expressions that betrayed the thoughts behind carefully constructed facades. 3 days later, scouts confirmed what those eye movements had told me. The Northern Kingdom was experiencing severe supply shortages. Their ambassador had been instructed to secure our resources while concealing their weakness, exactly what his unconscious eye movements had revealed. This experience taught me that, while people can control their words and even much of their facial expressions, the eyes operate on a more primitive level. They respond to internal states before the conscious mind can intervene. Fear, deception, aggression, and genuine emotion all create distinct patterns in the eyes that cannot be completely suppressed. I developed a specific technique for reading these micro-expressions during important conversations. Rather than staring directly, which makes people self-conscious and more guarded, I learned to use my peripheral vision while maintaining natural eye contact. This allowed me to catch the unconscious eye movements that revealed true emotional states. The pattern I observed most frequently was the deception sequence. When people prepare to lie or mislead, their eyes typically move away from direct contact, often following a specific direction based on how their mind processes the false information they're about to present. Left and down usually indicated constructed auditory information. They were creating words they had never heard. Right and up often signaled visual construction. They were imagining scenarios that had never occurred. But equally important was learning to recognize genuine emotions. When someone experiences real fear, their pupils dilate slightly and their blink rate increases, regardless of what brave words they might speak. When they feel genuine excitement or interest, their eyes brighten and focus intensely, even if they're trying to appear casual or uninterested. I remember another crucial moment when this skill proved invaluable. During a military council, one of my senior generals was reporting on enemy troop movements. His words were confident and his manner assured, but his eyes showed micro-expressions of fear and uncertainty. That brief glimpse warned me that his intelligence might be incomplete or unreliable. Rather than challenging him directly in front of the other officers, I asked specific follow-up questions while watching his eye responses. With each question, the fear in his eyes intensified, though his verbal responses remained confident. Later, in private, He admitted that his sources were uncertain, and he had been reluctant to appear incompetent in front of his peers. This taught me that the eyes not only reveal deception, but also genuine emotions that people feel they must hide. Sometimes what you see in someone's eyes isn't malicious intent, but vulnerable humanity, fear, insecurity, or uncertainty that they believe they cannot afford to show. In modern applications, this skill proves invaluable in every type of interaction. During job interviews, watch for the difference between genuine enthusiasm and performed interest. In business negotiations, observe whether confidence is real or manufactured. In personal relationships, notice when someone's eyes reveal emotions. Their words don't express. The key is practice and patience. Start by observing people in low-stakes situations where you can verify your impressions later. Pay attention to the correlation between eye movements and emotional states during casual conversations. Over time, you'll develop an intuitive understanding of this silent language that speaks louder than words. The most dangerous spy I ever encountered wasn't discovered through intercepted messages or suspicious activities. He was revealed by the way he stood during morning formations, a subtle shift in posture that betrayed loyalties his words never would have exposed. Commander Zhao had served in my forces for 2 years, displaying exemplary dedication and military bearing. His record was spotless, his tactical knowledge impressive, and his commitment to our cause appeared unwavering. Yet something about his physical presence during our strategic meetings began to trouble me, though I couldn't initially identify what. Like a puppet master's strings pulling invisible threads, the body reveals what the conscious mind tries to conceal. I had learned that while people can discipline their speech and control their facial expressions, the body operates on a more primitive level, responding to internal states and true loyalties in ways that consciousness cannot fully suppress. During our war councils, I began to notice that Zhao's body consistently oriented itself away from our central planning table, even when his attention appeared fully engaged. His shoulders, rather than squaring toward the discussion, maintained a slight angle that positioned him for quick exit. More telling, when we discussed our most sensitive strategies, his hands would unconsciously move toward his weapon, not in preparation for battle, but in the subtle defensive posture of someone who felt surrounded by potential enemies. The revelation came during a critical planning session for our next campaign. As I outlined our strategy for surprising the enemy's northern flank, Zhao's entire body stiffened in a way that suggested not excitement about our tactical advantage, but alarm about information he wished he hadn't heard. His feet, which had been casually positioned, suddenly planted themselves in a stance that suggested readiness to flee or fight. That night, I positioned trusted observers to watch Zhao's movements. What they discovered confirmed what his body language had already told me. He was meeting secretly with enemy agents, passing along the intelligence he gathered from our private councils. His conscious performance had been flawless, but his unconscious body had betrayed his true allegiance every day. This experience taught me that the body maintains what I call honest positioning. It naturally arranges itself according to genuine comfort, threat assessment, and loyalty patterns, regardless of what performance the conscious mind is conducting. People's physical positioning reveals their mental positioning more accurately than any words or deliberate actions. I identified 5 key body positions that consistently reveal true intentions. First is orientation. People unconsciously face toward what they value and away from what threatens them. Even in casual conversation, notice whether someone's body is fully engaged with you or positioned for departure. Second is boundary management. How people position themselves relative to others reveals their comfort level and trust. Someone who maintains unusual distance might be hiding something, while someone who violates normal boundaries might be seeking to intimidate or manipulate. Third is defensive positioning, unconscious protective gestures like crossed arms, hands near, weapons or exits, or shifting weight to the back foot all suggest internal discomfort that contradicts verbal expressions of confidence or agreement. Fourth is attention scattering. When someone's true focus is elsewhere, their body will show it through fidgeting, partial turns, or energy directed away from the conversation, even while they maintain verbal engagement. Fifth is stress bleeding. Anxiety, deception, or guilt create physical tension that manifests through rigid postures, repetitive movements, or unnatural stillness that contradicts their apparent emotional state. The critical insight is that physical positioning reflects psychological positioning. If someone feels like an outsider, their body will position itself like an outsider, regardless of their verbal claims of loyalty. If they're planning betrayal, their body will maintain readiness for conflict or escape, even during friendly interactions. In modern contexts, watch how colleagues position themselves during meetings. Notice whether their body language suggests full engagement or partial attention. Observe how people arrange themselves in social situations. Their unconscious choices reveal their true feelings about hierarchy, trust, and allegiance. The difference between natural and performed body language becomes clear with practice. Natural positioning flows and adjusts organically. Performed body language maintains artificial positions that create subtle tension patterns visible to trained observers. Remember, the body cannot lie for extended periods. Even the most skilled performer will eventually show their true internal state through unconscious physical betrayals that reveal what their words carefully conceal. The most valuable intelligence I ever gathered came not from what an enemy revealed, but from what he carefully avoided mentioning during 3 days of seemingly open conversation. General Wang had arrived under a flag of truce, speaking at length about his forces, his strategies, and his kingdom's military capabilities. Yet in all his detailed discussions, he never once mentioned their cavalry, an omission that told me everything I needed to know, like hollow bamboo that appears solid. Until you discover the empty space within, conversations often contain crucial voids that speak louder than any words. I had learned to listen not just to what people said, but to map the territories their words avoided, the subjects they skirted, and the information they conspicuously omitted. During our negotiations, Wang spoke proudly of his infantry formations, described his siege equipment in detail, and even boasted about his archers' accuracy. But when natural conversation should have led to discussing mounted units, he would smoothly redirect to other topics. When I casually mentioned cavalry tactics, he would acknowledge the comment briefly before changing the subject entirely. This pattern of avoidance created a map of his army's weaknesses. His silence about cavalry suggested they had either suffered significant losses in that area or never possessed strong mounted forces to begin with. Subsequent reconnaissance confirmed my suspicion. His cavalry had been decimated in a recent campaign, leaving him vulnerable to exactly the type of mobile assault I was planning. This experience taught me that silence often speaks louder than words, particularly when that silence follows predictable patterns. People naturally avoid discussing their weaknesses, failures, or areas of uncertainty. By mapping what they don't mention, you can often identify precisely where their vulnerabilities lie. I developed a technique for tracking these conversational omissions. During important discussions, I would maintain a mental inventory of topics that naturally should arise but didn't. Family members who are never mentioned, career achievements that seem absent from their history, or current projects they avoid discussing, all create revealing gaps in their narrative. Equally important is listening to emotional undertones that contradict the content of what's being said. I once negotiated with a merchant who spoke enthusiastically about a trade opportunity, using all the right words about profit and mutual benefit. Yet his voice carried undertones of reluctance and uncertainty that suggested he was being pressured into the deal rather than pursuing it willingly. Those subtle emotional contradictions warned me to investigate further. I discovered that he was indeed being coerced by political forces beyond his control, and the trade agreement he offered came with hidden complications that would have damaged our position. The power of topic changes and deflections became another crucial skill. When people consistently steer conversations away from specific subjects, they're usually protecting something in that area. A general who changes the subject every time supply lines are mentioned might be dealing with logistics problems. A courtier who deflects discussions about certain nobles might have compromised relationships in those quarters. But I also learned to distinguish between protective omissions and strategic information management. Not everyone who avoids certain topics is hiding weakness or deception. Sometimes they're protecting others, maintaining necessary confidentiality, or simply being appropriately discreet about sensitive matters. The key insight is that people's choice of words and choice of silence reveals their priorities, fears, and areas of sensitivity more clearly than any direct questioning could. Someone who talks extensively about their military victories but never mentions their defeats is telling you where their confidence lies and where their insecurities hide. In modern applications, notice what colleagues avoid mentioning in projects updates, what topics friends deflect in personal conversations, or what subjects potential partners consistently sidestep. These conversational gaps often contain the most important information about their true situation and concerns. Practice this skill by learning to hear not just what is said, but what should have been said and wasn't. After decades of observing human behavior across every level of society, from common soldiers to imperial courtiers, from foreign diplomats to my own family members, I discovered something remarkable. Deception follows universal patterns that transcend culture, status, and individual personality. Like navigating through a maze of mirrors where truth and falsehood create confusing reflections, understanding these patterns became my guide through the labyrinth of human duplicity. The first pattern I identified was the escalation sequence. Deception rarely begins with major lies. It starts small and grows. I watched a young officer begin by exaggerating minor details in his reports, perhaps claiming he had 20 men when he actually had 18, or reporting that a patrol covered more ground than it actually did. These small embellishments seemed harmless, but I observed how they progressively grew larger until he was fabricating entire encounters with enemy forces. This pattern appears everywhere because small deceptions serve as practice runs for larger ones. They test whether the deceiver can maintain their false narrative and whether their audience will accept it. Each successful small deception builds confidence for the next larger one, creating a progression that inevitably leads to significant betrayals. The second pattern involves overcompensation. When people are being deceptive about something, they often provide excessive detail or emphasis in that exact area to deflect suspicion. I once suspected a supply officer of stealing provisions, and during questioning, he gave extraordinarily detailed accounts of his inventory, procedures, his security measures, and his personal integrity, far more information than the situation required. This overcompensation actually highlighted the area where deception was occurring. The third pattern is deflection through accusation. People engaged in deception often accuse others of the very behavior they're practicing. A court official who was secretly negotiating with our enemies became the loudest voice calling for investigations into other people's loyalty. By positioning himself as the defender of truth, he deflected attention from his own duplicity. The fourth pattern involves creating confusion around facts. Deceptive people often muddy the waters by introducing irrelevant details, contradictory timelines, or complex explanations that make it difficult to verify their claims. A merchant trying to hide overcharging would create elaborate stories about fluctuating costs, special circumstances, and complex calculations that obscured the simple fact that he was taking more than the agreed price. The fifth pattern is selective memory. People remember in extraordinary detail the events that support their narrative while becoming remarkably forgetful about inconvenient facts. I watched a general give precise accounts of his tactical decisions during successful engagements while claiming uncertainty about his choices during defeats. The sixth pattern involves emotional manipulation. When caught in inconsistencies, deceptive people often shift from facts to emotions, expressing hurt that their honesty is questioned or anger at being subjected to scrutiny. This emotional response is designed to make the questioner feel guilty for pursuing the truth. The seventh pattern is alliance building. Deceptive people work to surround themselves with supporters who will vouch for their character or corroborate their stories. I observed how those planning betrayals would carefully cultivate relationships with people who might later serve as character witnesses. The eighth and most dangerous pattern is truth layering. Sophisticated deceivers embed their lies within larger frameworks of truth, making detection extremely difficult. They'll be completely honest about 90% of what they say, using that honesty to make their deceptions more believable. What fascinated me was how these patterns manifested differently across cultures and personality types while maintaining their core structure. A diplomatic lie followed the same escalation sequence as a soldier's false report, though the sophistication and presentation varied dramatically. Understanding these patterns transformed my ability to predict behavior. Once I could identify which pattern someone was following, I could anticipate their next moves and prepare accordingly. More importantly, recognizing these universal patterns helped me understand that deception isn't necessarily about moral character. It's often about circumstances, pressures, and perceived necessities that drive people toward these predictable behaviors. The key insight is that while the content of deception varies infinitely, the structure remains remarkably consistent. By learning to recognize these patterns rather than focusing on specific lies, you develop the ability to see through deception regardless of how cleverly it's presented or how unfamiliar the context might be. The most valuable lesson about human nature came to me not through careful analysis, but in a single moment of unexpected revelation. I had been observing Chancellor Ming for months, unable to determine whether his loyalty was genuine or performed. Then came the night when enemy forces breached our outer defenses, and in those chaotic moments when death seemed imminent, Ming's true character emerged with startling clarity, like a sundial that reveals truth only when the light strikes it. At the precise angle, people show their authentic selves at specific, predictable moments when their conscious defenses naturally weaken. I discovered that while people can maintain their facades during normal circumstances, certain situations strip away these carefully constructed presentations and reveal the person beneath, as our fortress walls shook under enemy bombardment, and retreat seemed our only option. I watched Ming's response. For months, he had spoken eloquently of honor, duty, and willingness to sacrifice for our cause. But when actual sacrifice became necessary, his actions told a different story. While others organized defenses and rallied troops, Ming was quietly gathering his personal belongings and positioning himself near the escape routes. This taught me that crisis reveals character more reliably than any conversation or observation during peaceful times. When people face genuine pressure, their true priorities surface. The masks they wear during comfortable circumstances cannot be maintained when survival instincts take over. I identified 5 critical moments when people naturally drop their guards and reveal their authentic selves. The first is during unexpected crisis, as I witnessed with Ming. When people are forced to make rapid decisions under pressure, they don't have time to calculate the optimal response. They react from their core nature. The second revealing moment occurs during unexpected success. I observed how people respond when they achieve something they've worked toward, particularly when they believe others aren't watching. Some become generous and inclusive, sharing credit and celebrating others. Others become possessive and paranoid, immediately working to protect their new position from potential threats. The third moment is during transition periods, when someone is leaving one position for another, ending one relationship while beginning another, or moving between different phases of life. During these transitions, people often let down their guard because they're focused on the change ahead rather than maintaining their current performance. The fourth critical time is late in extended interactions. I learned that people can maintain conscious facades for limited periods, but fatigue eventually sets in. During long negotiations, multi-day visits, or extended campaigns, I would pay closest attention to behavior in the final phases when exhaustion weakened their ability to perform. The fifth moment occurs when people believe they're in completely safe environments with trusted companions. I developed the ability to create or recognize these moments, observing how people behaved when they thought no one important was watching or listening. Understanding these timing patterns allowed me to be strategically patient. Rather than trying to force revelations through confrontation or interrogation, I learned to wait for the natural moments when truth would surface on its own. This patience often provided more reliable information than any aggressive investigation could yield. I also discovered the power of creating situations that naturally revealed character, not through manipulation or entrapment, but by providing opportunities for people to show their authentic responses to various circumstances. How someone treats subordinates when no superiors are present, how they handle resources when accountability is unclear, how they respond to others' success or failure. These situations reveal character more clearly than any direct questioning. Modern applications pay attention to how people behave during stressful deadlines, unexpected opportunities, or moments when they think they're not being observed. Notice the difference between someone's public persona and their behavior during casual, unguarded moments. The key insight is that timing is everything in reading people's true intentions. The same person who appears trustworthy during routine interactions might reveal entirely different priorities when circumstances change. The art of making people reveal their true intentions without them realizing they're doing so became one of my most powerful tools. I learned this through necessity when I suspected Captain Lee of being a double agent, but had no proof and couldn't risk alerting him to my suspicions. Direct confrontation would have either forced him underground or revealed my own hand prematurely. Instead, I developed a questioning technique that worked like a fisherman's net, appearing harmless while systematically gathering the information I needed. The key breakthrough came when I realized that people naturally want to appear knowledgeable and competent. By asking questions that seemed to seek their expertise rather than test their honesty, I could encourage them to reveal far more than they intended. With Captain Lee, I began asking his opinions on various strategic scenarios, seemingly seeking his tactical insights. Captain Lee, I would say, you've spent time in the northern regions. If you were planning to move troops through that territory undetected, which routes would you consider? His detailed knowledge of routes, timing, and defensive positions revealed not just familiarity with the area, but an understanding that went far beyond what his assigned duties should have provided. I developed 3 types of questions that consistently bypass people's conscious defenses. Knowledge questions appear to seek their expertise while actually testing what they know and how they know it. Someone who has more information than they should or demonstrates familiarity with situations they shouldn't have encountered reveals their true activities through their eagerness to appear knowledgeable. Hypothetical questions create safe spaces for people to reveal their thinking without feeling like they're confessing anything. If someone wanted to achieve X, how might they go about it? These questions often elicit detailed responses that reveal not just knowledge, but actual experience with the scenarios being discussed. Value questions uncover what people truly care about by asking them to make choices or judgments. Which do you think is more important in this situation, loyalty or results? The way people answer these questions, and particularly which factors they emphasize or dismiss, reveals their authentic priorities and moral framework. The most powerful technique I discovered was creating question sequences that build revelation progressively. Rather than asking one direct question that might trigger defensive responses, I would design a series of questions that each seemed innocent but collectively created a complete picture. With Captain Lee, I started by asking about general regional geography, then moved to questions about seasonal travel patterns, then to discussions of how various armies had moved through the area historically. Each question seemed natural as a follow-up to the previous one, but together they revealed his knowledge of current enemy positions and recent troop movements that he could only have obtained through unauthorized contact. The crucial element was making him comfortable enough to reveal his true thoughts. I accomplished this by sharing some of my own insights and opinions first, creating an atmosphere of mutual exchange rather than interrogation. When people feel they're part of a collaborative discussion rather than being examined, they naturally become more open. I also learned the importance of emotional intelligence in strategic questioning. Reading someone's comfort level, adjusting my approach based on their personality type, and recognizing when to push forward versus when to back off made the difference between successful revelation and defensive shutdown. The most sophisticated aspect was learning to ask questions that revealed character and motivation, not just facts. What do you think drives people to make difficult choices in challenging circumstances? Questions like this encouraged people to reveal their own moral reasoning and decision-making patterns, often projecting their personal approach onto their theoretical answers. But I discovered that timing and context were everything. The same questions asked in formal settings might produce guarded responses, while identical questions during casual conversations could yield remarkable insights. I learned to create natural opportunities for these discussions rather than forcing them. The ethical dimension became important as well. This technique works precisely because it creates genuine conversations where people feel heard and valued for their insights. It succeeds when used to understand people better, not to trap or manipulate them. The goal should always be clearer communication and better relationships, not exploitation of vulnerabilities. In modern applications, these techniques prove invaluable during job interviews, business negotiations, and relationship building. The key is always making the other person feel respected and valued while naturally encouraging them to share their authentic thoughts and perspectives. Learning to read others' intentions would have been meaningless if I hadn't also mastered the art of protecting myself from those who might try to deceive me. The greatest challenge wasn't identifying deception, it was maintaining relationships and appearing trustworthy while guarding against betrayal. Like an invisible shield made of transparent jade, effective protection doesn't reveal itself, but deflects danger nonetheless. The turning point came when I realized that complete mistrust was as dangerous as complete trust. After Wei's betrayal, my initial response was to become suspicious of everyone, questioning every motive and doubting every interaction. This hypervigilance damaged my relationships with loyal allies and created an atmosphere of paranoia that weakened my position more than any enemy could. I needed a more sophisticated approach, one that allowed me to remain open and collaborative, while building systematic protection against deception. The solution was developing what I called verification protocols that appeared natural and relationship-preserving while ensuring I wasn't vulnerable to false information or hidden agendas. My first principle became triangulation of important information. Rather than relying on single sources for crucial intelligence, I developed networks that allowed me to verify critical facts through multiple independent channels. When General Zhang reported enemy troop movements, I would casually seek confirmation through other sources, scouts, merchants, or diplomatic contacts who wouldn't know they were providing verification. This wasn't about distrusting Zhang specifically, but about building systems that protected against any single point of failure in my information network. I presented this as thorough strategic planning rather than suspicion, maintaining positive relationships while ensuring accuracy. The second principle involved creating low-stakes tests of reliability. I would occasionally share different versions of non-critical information with different people, then observe how that information traveled and whether it was reported accurately. Someone who consistently distorted small details or shared confidential information inappropriately revealed their unsuitability for handling truly sensitive matters. These tests never involved anything that could harm relationships or operations. If mishandled, they were designed to reveal character patterns without creating damage. A person who proved reliable with minor confidences could gradually be trusted with more significant responsibilities. My third protection strategy was maintaining multiple communication channels and relationships. Rather than becoming dependent on any single advisor, ally, or information source, I cultivated diverse networks that could function independently. This redundancy meant that even if one relationship was compromised, my overall strategic position remained secure. I also learned to balance transparency with appropriate discretion. Being completely open with everyone would have made me vulnerable to those with hidden agendas, but being secretive with everyone would have damaged necessary trust. The solution was graduated disclosure, sharing information appropriate to each person's role, demonstrated reliability, and genuine need to know. The most sophisticated protection involved creating what appeared to be vulnerability while maintaining actual security. I would sometimes share concerns or uncertainties with specific people, then observe how they responded. Those with genuine loyalty would offer support and keep confidences, while those with hidden agendas would often try to exploit perceived weaknesses or share sensitive information inappropriately. This technique required careful emotional intelligence. I had to distinguish between someone who might inadvertently breach confidentiality versus someone who would deliberately exploit sensitive information. The difference lay in patterns of behavior and underlying motivations. I developed a reputation management strategy that made me appear trusting and collaborative while actually being quite protected. By being genuinely helpful and supportive. To others, I created positive relationships that made most people want to be honest with me. This goodwill became a form of protection, as people were less likely to deceive someone they genuinely respected and valued. But perhaps the most important protection was maintaining my own integrity. By being consistently honest and reliable myself, I created an environment where others felt safe being authentic with me. This didn't eliminate deception entirely, but it reduced the frequency and made genuine deception more obvious by contrast. The key insight was that the best protection against deception isn't suspicion or isolation. It's building systems and relationships that naturally encourage honesty while providing verification when needed. The most uncomfortable but necessary skill I developed was learning to think like those who would deceive me. This mental exercise felt like betraying my own principles, but it became essential for anticipating threats before they materialized. Like a chess master who must understand every possible move, including the ones they would never make themselves, I had to comprehend the mindset of betrayal to defend against it. The breakthrough came during a period when I suspected someone in my inner circle was feeding information to our enemies, but I couldn't identify who. Traditional observation and questioning had yielded no clear answers. That's when I realized I needed to approach the problem differently. Instead of trying to catch the betrayer in action, I would think like a betrayer myself. I asked myself, if I wanted to spy on my own forces, how would I do it? Which position would give me the best access to sensitive information? What methods would I use to communicate with enemies without detection? How would I maintain my cover while gathering intelligence? This mental exercise immediately narrowed my focus to 3 possible suspects based purely on opportunity and Access. Next, I considered motivation. What would drive someone in my position to betray their own cause? Personal grievances, family pressure, financial desperation, ideological differences, or coercion through threats? By understanding these potential motivations, I could observe my suspects more strategically, looking for signs of the pressures that might drive betrayal. The mental shift required was significant. I had to temporarily abandon my natural inclination toward trust and loyalty, instead embracing the calculating mindset of someone who views relationships as opportunities for exploitation. This felt foreign and disturbing, but it revealed patterns I had been blind to. When I imagined myself as a spy within my own organization, I realized that the most effective approach would be to appear exceptionally loyal and dedicated, perhaps even more so than genuinely loyal people. This insight led me to pay special attention to those who seemed almost too perfect in their dedication, particularly if that dedication felt performed rather than natural. I also realized that an effective spy would need to occasionally provide genuine, valuable intelligence to maintain credibility, while carefully controlling which information reached the enemy. This understanding helped me identify several instances where intelligence that should have remained secret had somehow become known to our opponents. The exercise revealed three distinct mindsets that drive deceptive behavior. The opportunistic mindset sees every situation as a chance for personal advantage, constantly calculating how to benefit from others' trust. People with this mindset are often charming and helpful, but their assistance always serves their own agenda. The survival mindset operates from fear. These people deceive because they believe honesty will lead to rejection, punishment, or loss. They're not necessarily malicious, but they're driven by anxiety about consequences, leading them to create false narratives they believe are safer than truth. The ideological mindset justifies deception as serving a higher purpose. These people convince themselves that their betrayal serves a greater good, whether that's family loyalty, political beliefs, or personal principles that supersede their current obligations. Understanding these mindsets helped me recognize the warning signs in people's behavior and reasoning. Someone constantly seeking advantage might be trustworthy in situations where their interests align with yours, but dangerous when those interests diverge. Someone driven by fear needs reassurance and clear consequences rather than threats. Someone with conflicting ideologies requires direct conversation about loyalties and priorities. The most valuable insight was realizing that thinking like a deceiver also revealed how to prevent deception. By understanding the conditions that make betrayal attractive or necessary, I could often eliminate those conditions. Addressing people's legitimate concerns, ensuring fair treatment, and providing clear expectations reduce the motivations that drive most deceptive behavior. This counterintelligence thinking also improved my strategic planning in business and personal relationships. By anticipating how others might try to gain advantage or protect themselves, I could create situations that aligned everyone's interests more effectively. The key was learning to engage this mindset temporarily and strategically, rather than allowing it to become my permanent perspective. The goal was understanding, not cynicism, developing the ability to see potential threats while maintaining my fundamental commitment to building relationships based on mutual respect and genuine collaboration. Modern applications include anticipating competitive moves in business, understanding political maneuvering in organizations, and recognizing manipulation in personal relationships, all while maintaining your own ethical standards and commitment to authentic connection. The most complex challenge I ever faced in reading intentions came not from individual deception, but from understanding the intricate web of relationships within the Royal Council, like a spider's web, where every thread connects to every other. Thread group dynamics revealed individual intentions more clearly than any private conversation could, but only if you understood how to read the interconnected patterns of loyalty, rivalry, and hidden alliance. During the crisis of succession, when our aging king's health was failing and 3 princes competed for the throne, I needed to understand not just each council member's individual loyalties, but how their relationships with each other would influence their ultimate decisions. The formal alliances were obvious. Certain nobles had openly declared their support for specific princes. But the real power structure lay in the subtle network of obligations, fears, and mutual dependencies that operated beneath the surface. I discovered that people reveal themselves differently in groups than they do in isolation. In private conversations, individuals can maintain careful control over their presentation, but in group settings, they must navigate multiple relationships simultaneously, and this complexity makes it much harder to maintain consistent facades across all interactions. Breakthrough came when I began mapping not just who spoke to whom, but how the energy flowed during group discussions. I noticed that the true decision-makers weren't always those who spoke most or held the highest official positions. Instead, power revealed itself through subtle patterns, whose opinions others waited to hear before forming their own, whose subtle reactions influenced the room's mood, whose quiet words carried more weight than others' passionate speeches. Lord Chen held a relatively minor official position, yet I observed that other council members would glance at him before committing to positions on important matters. His slight nod or barely perceptible frown would shift the entire room's energy. This told me that Chen wielded influence far beyond his formal authority, information that proved crucial when the succession crisis reached its peak. I developed techniques for reading the undercurrents of group interactions. Physical positioning revealed alliance patterns. People naturally positioned themselves near allies and created distance from rivals, even in settings where these relationships weren't supposed to matter. During heated debates, I watched who made eye contact with whom, whose arguments received supportive body language, and who remained carefully neutral. The timing of responses became another crucial indicator. In genuine collaborative discussions, people respond naturally to ideas as they arise. But when hidden agendas are operating, you see calculated delays as people wait to see how their responses will be received by specific individuals whose opinions matter to them. I learned to identify the different types of alliances that operated simultaneously within groups. Convenience alliances brought people together around specific issues, but dissolved when circumstances changed. Ideological alliances united people around shared beliefs or values. Personal alliances were based on friendship, family connections, or mutual benefit, and survival alliances formed when people needed each other's protection against common threats. The most revealing moments came during transitions between topics or when unexpected information was introduced. These disruptions forced people to reveal their authentic reactions before they could calculate appropriate responses. I would sometimes introduce neutral but surprising information just to observe how various relationships and loyalties manifested in people's immediate responses. One of my most important discoveries was that group settings often reveal people's true priorities through resource allocation, not just money or materials, but attention, support, and political capital. Who someone chooses to defend during conflicts, whose ideas they build upon, and whose concerns they prioritize, all reveal their genuine loyalties more clearly than any stated alliances. The spider's web metaphor became central to my understanding. In groups, everyone's position depends on everyone else's position. Change one relationship, and the entire network shifts. Understanding these interconnections allowed me to predict how individual decisions would ripple through the entire group structure. I also learned to distinguish between surface tensions and deeper structural conflicts. Some apparent rivalries were actually collaborative relationships where public disagreement served both parties' interests. Other relationships that appeared harmonious were actually unstable competitions waiting for the right moment to explode. Modern applications of these skills prove invaluable in corporate environments, where understanding organizational dynamics often matters more than individual competencies. Pay attention to meeting dynamics. Observe how information flows through teams, and notice whose opinions carry informal influence beyond their official roles. The key insight is that groups amplify individual characteristics while creating new dynamics that don't exist in one-on-one interactions. Master group reading, and you understand not just what people think, but how their thinking influences and is influenced by the complex web of relationships around them. Though I lived in an age of bronze weapons and silk scrolls, the principles I discovered about human nature transcend any particular technology or era. Like an ancient compass that still points true north regardless of the landscape it navigates, the fundamental patterns of human intention remain constant even as the methods of communication evolve dramatically. If I were to observe your modern world, I would see that people still deceive for the same three reasons I identified centuries ago: survival, advantage, and fear. But the tools they use to deceive and the tools you can use to detect deception have multiplied exponentially. The challenge isn't that human nature has changed, it's that the number of channels through which that nature expresses itself has expanded beyond what any ancient strategist could have imagined. In my time, written communication was formal and deliberate. Scribes carefully composed messages knowing that every word would be scrutinized. Today, you communicate through devices that capture not just your words, but the speed of your responses, the frequency of your communications, even the times when you choose not to respond. These digital traces create patterns that reveal intentions just as clearly as body language once did for me. Consider how the deception patterns I identified manifest in your electronic communications. The escalation sequence still appears. People who begin with small false claims in emails or messages often progress to larger deceptions. Overcompensation shows up as excessively detailed explanations in written communications. Deflection through accusation appears in how people respond to challenging questions in digital formats. The timing principles I discovered prove even more relevant in your connected world. People's authentic selves emerge in their unguarded digital moments. Late-night messages when their conscious filters are weakened, immediate responses during crisis situations, or spontaneous communications during emotional highs and lows. What fascinates me about your digital age is how it creates permanent records of the behavioral patterns I could only observe momentarily. Your devices capture response times, communication frequency, word choices, and even the corrections people make before sending messages. These digital artifacts reveal thought processes and emotional states with unprecedented clarity. But your modern tools also create new challenges. In my era, deception required face-to-face performance or carefully crafted written messages. Today, people can construct elaborate false personas across multiple platforms, maintaining deceptions over extended periods with minimal effort. Chez the femme, distance created by digital communication makes it easier to sustain false narratives because the immediate feedback from direct human interaction is absent. Yet the same technology that enables sophisticated deception also provides powerful tools for detection. Where I had to rely on memory and intuition to track patterns over time, your systems can analyze communication histories, cross-reference information across platforms, and identify inconsistencies that would have taken me months to discover. The principles I used for reading group dynamics apply directly to your digital networks, where relationships and allegiances reveal themselves through connection patterns, shared content, and response behaviors. The spider web of relationships I learned to map in physical spaces now exists as literal networks you can visualize and analyze. Your challenge is learning to adapt face-to-face observation skills to virtual interactions. Video communications allow you to observe many of the body language and facial expression patterns I relied upon. though the limited view and potential for technical manipulation require adjusted techniques. The key insight for your era is that increased communication channels mean increased opportunities for both deception and detection. Every digital interaction leaves traces that reveal patterns, but interpreting those traces requires the same fundamental understanding of human nature that guided my observations centuries ago. Most importantly, the human need for authentic connection hasn't changed. Even in your digital age, people still crave genuine relationships built on trust and mutual understanding. The technology that enables deception also makes authentic communication more possible when used with wisdom and good intentions. The principles that served me in ancient courts and battlefields can serve you in modern offices and relationships, adapted to new tools but grounded in the timeless realities of human nature. The true test of any wisdom lies not in understanding it intellectually, but in applying it successfully to the complexities of daily life. Like a merchant scale that must weigh truth carefully in every transaction, the principles I've shared must prove themselves useful in the countless interactions that shape your personal and professional success. Let me share how these techniques transform specific situations you encounter regularly. In workplace settings, the ability to read intentions can mean the difference between career advancement and professional stagnation. When colleagues offer to collaborate on projects, observe whether their actions match their stated enthusiasm. Do they follow through on commitments promptly, or do their contributions require constant prompting? Their behavior patterns reveal whether they see the collaboration as genuine opportunity or convenient exploitation. During team meetings, watch for the group dynamics I described. Notice who defers to whom before taking positions, whose ideas gain immediate support versus those that are politely dismissed, and how information flows between different members. The formal organizational chart may show one power structure, but the actual influence network often operates very differently. When negotiating with vendors, clients, or business partners, apply the strategic questioning techniques to understand their true constraints and motivations. Rather than accepting initial proposals, ask about their decision-making process, their alternative options, and what outcomes would represent genuine success for them. Their responses and their omissions reveal far more than their formal presentations. In personal relationships, these skills prove equally valuable, but require more delicate application. When someone you're romantically interested in describes their relationship goals, observe whether their actions align with their stated intentions. Do they make time for activities that build deeper connection, or do their behavior suggest they're more interested in convenience and entertainment? Pay attention to how potential partners treat people in service positions, waitstaff, retail, employees, or others in seemingly powerless roles. These interactions reveal character more clearly than any carefully managed conversation could. Someone who is dismissive or rude to those who can't benefit them shows you exactly how they'll treat you when the initial romance fades. Family dynamics often provide the richest opportunities for applying these principles. During family gatherings, observe the undercurrents of old rivalries, unexpressed resentments, and shifting alliances. Understanding these patterns helps you navigate relationships more effectively and avoid being drawn into conflicts that have nothing to do with you. When dealing with salespeople, service providers, or anyone trying to influence your decisions, use the timing principles to your advantage. Notice how their presentation changes when you show hesitation versus enthusiasm. Genuine service providers remain consistent because they're focused on meeting your actual needs. Manipulative ones adjust their approach based on reading your vulnerability or resistance. The ethics of using these abilities responsibly cannot be overstated. These techniques give you significant advantages in understanding others, but that advantage comes with the responsibility to use it constructively. The goal should always be building stronger, more authentic relationships and making better decisions, not manipulating or exploiting others. I've found that the greatest benefit comes from understanding people well enough to communicate with them more effectively. When you can see past someone's defensive behaviors to their underlying concerns, you can address their real needs rather than just their surface positions. This leads to outcomes that genuinely benefit everyone involved. Leadership. Effectiveness improves dramatically when you can read the true state of your team. Understanding who is genuinely engaged versus who is simply complying, recognizing when people have concerns they're reluctant to express, and identifying the informal influence patterns within your organization allows you to lead with both wisdom and compassion. But perhaps the most important application is self-awareness. As you develop skill in reading others, you also become more conscious of your own patterns, motivations, and unconscious behaviors. This self-knowledge helps you communicate more authentically and build the kind of reputation that encourages others to be genuine with you. The merchant's scale reminds us that truth must be weighed carefully in every situation. Sometimes the kind thing is to address what you've observed directly. Other times, wisdom calls for patience and gentle guidance. The skill lies not just in seeing truth, but in knowing how to respond to it in ways that strengthen rather than damage your relationships. Remember that these abilities make you more effective, but they also make you more responsible for the outcomes of your interactions with others. The ultimate purpose of understanding human intentions isn't to become a master manipulator or to live in perpetual suspicion of others. Like an alliance seal carved in jade that represents sacred bonds between true allies, the highest application of these skills is building relationships of extraordinary depth, trust, and mutual benefit with people whose character has proven worthy of your complete confidence. After decades of observing human nature in its most complex and dangerous forms, I discovered something that might surprise you. The people most worth understanding deeply are often those who have the least to hide. The greatest strategic advantage comes not from outwitting enemies, but from building unshakable alliances with individuals whose integrity matches your own. I learned to distinguish between three categories of people in my life, and this framework served me well in both war and peace. Associates are people you work with professionally, useful relationships built around specific functions or mutual benefit, but not requiring deep personal trust. You can apply the reading techniques I've taught to understand their motivations and ensure fair dealings, but these relationships operate within defined boundaries. Allies are people whose interests align with yours in significant ways, creating opportunities for deeper collaboration and mutual support. These relationships require more careful evaluation because they involve greater interdependence. You want to understand their character, reliability, and long-term vision to ensure that your alliance will remain beneficial as circumstances change. But the most valuable category consists of those rare individuals who earn the designation of trusted friends, people whose character, wisdom, and loyalty have been tested through various circumstances and proven consistently worthy. These are the relationships worth investing your deepest efforts to understand and nurture. The paradox I discovered is that the better you become at reading people's hidden agendas, the more you appreciate those who operate without hidden agendas. There's profound relief and strength in relationships where you can be completely transparent because you trust the other person's integrity absolutely, and they can be equally transparent with you. I once had an enemy general named Liang who had fought against me for 3 years before circumstances forced us to negotiate directly. Through our extended discussions, I began to understand that his opposition to my forces stemmed not from personal animosity or political opportunism, but from genuine concern for his people's welfare. His intentions were completely transparent once I understood his underlying values. When the broader conflict ended, I made the surprising decision to recommend Liang for a position in the unified command structure. My advisors thought I was making a dangerous mistake, but I had read his character thoroughly and understood that his integrity made him valuable regardless of our past opposition. He became one of my most trusted allies and eventually a true friend whose counsel I valued above almost all others. This experience taught me that some of the strongest relationships begin with honest opposition rather than false agreement. When someone disagrees with you from authentic principles rather than hidden motives, you're dealing with a person whose character you can respect, even when their position conflicts with yours. The key to building strategic relationships is learning to recognize and cultivate connections with people of genuine integrity. These are individuals whose actions consistently align with their stated values, who treat others fairly regardless of power dynamics, and who can be trusted to communicate honestly even when the truth is uncomfortable. With such people, the reading techniques I've taught take on a different purpose. Instead of protecting yourself from deception, you use your enhanced understanding to communicate more effectively, to support them better, and to build the kind of partnership that becomes a source of strength for both parties. I developed a practice of transparency testing with potential close allies. I would gradually share more personal thoughts, concerns, and even vulnerabilities, observing how they handled this trust. Those who responded with appropriate discretion, genuine support, and reciprocal openness proved themselves worthy of deeper confidence. The greatest strategic advantage in life comes from assembling an inner circle of people whose character you understand completely and whose loyalty you can count on absolutely. These relationships become sources of honest feedback, reliable support during difficult times, and collaborative power that exceeds what any individual could achieve alone. Building this inner circle requires patience, wisdom, and the courage to be genuinely authentic with others. But when you find people who respond to authenticity with authenticity, who meet trust with trustworthiness, and who share your commitment to integrity, you've discovered something more valuable than any tactical advantage, relationships that enrich your life and multiply your positive impact on the world. Even after decades of studying human nature and applying these principles in the most consequential situations imaginable, I must confess something that might surprise you. I never stopped being a student of human behavior, like a student's empty cup that must remain unfilled to receive new wisdom. The moment you believe you have mastered the art of reading people is the moment you become vulnerable to those who will surprise you with their complexity. The most humbling lesson of my later years came when I completely misread the intentions of a young diplomat who had come to negotiate a trade agreement. Everything about his manner suggested inexperience and naivety. He seemed overwhelmed by the formal protocol, uncertain about his authority, and eager to please. I approached the negotiations expecting to guide a nervous young man through his first important assignment. What I discovered was that his apparent inexperience was actually sophisticated strategy. He had deliberately presented himself as unthreatening and uncertain to encourage me to reveal more of my own position than I normally would. His questions, which seemed to come from confusion, were actually precisely designed to gather specific intelligence about our resources and limitations. By the end of our negotiations, he had secured terms far more favorable to his kingdom than his initial position should have allowed. This experience reminded me that human nature contains infinite variations, and that people continuously develop new ways to present themselves and pursue their goals. The patterns I had identified were reliable, but not universal. The techniques I had mastered were powerful, but not infallible. The confidence I had developed was valuable, but potentially dangerous if it led to complacency. From that point forward, I committed to treating every significant interaction as a learning opportunity. I began keeping detailed notes about my observations and their accuracy, tracking which techniques worked in which circumstances and which assumptions proved incorrect. This practice of regular self-assessment became as important as the observational skills themselves. I developed a routine of honest reflection after important meetings or negotiations. What had I observed correctly? What had I missed? Which of my predictions proved accurate, and which were based on incomplete understanding? This systematic review helped me refine my abilities and avoid repeating the same mistakes. Most importantly, I learned to seek feedback from trusted allies about my own behavior and perceptions. Sometimes the person you're trying to read understands the dynamic better than you do. By asking thoughtful questions about their experience of our interactions, I gained insights that pure observation could never provide. The humility required for continuous learning extends beyond just improving your technique. It shapes how you approach relationships with others. When you recognize that your understanding of someone might be incomplete or evolving, you remain open to discovering new aspects of their character and motivations. This openness often leads to deeper, more authentic connections than rigid assumptions ever could. I also learned the importance of accepting that some people will remain fundamentally unknowable, regardless of how sophisticated your reading abilities become. This isn't a failure of technique. It's recognition that human beings are complex enough to exceed any systematic understanding. The wisest approach is often to acknowledge this mystery while still using your observational skills to navigate relationships as effectively as possible. The danger of overconfidence became clear to me through several experiences where my certainty about someone's character or intentions prevented me from seeing important changes in their circumstances or thinking. People grow, circumstances evolve, and even well-understood individuals can surprise you with new responses to unexpected situations. Building a practice of daily observation and reflection proved essential for maintaining and improving these skills. I would choose one person each day to observe more carefully than usual, not for any strategic purpose, but simply to continue developing my ability to notice subtle patterns and behaviors. This practice kept my skills sharp while providing regular opportunities to discover new aspects of human nature. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that mastery in reading people should make you more compassionate, not more cynical. The deeper you understand the fears, pressures, and genuine challenges that drive much human behavior, the easier it becomes to respond with wisdom and kindness rather than judgment or manipulation. The empty cup reminds us that there is always more to learn about the inexhaustible complexity and potential of human nature. As I reach the end of sharing these insights with you, I want to leave you with the most important wisdom I've gained through a lifetime of studying human nature. Like a master's legacy scroll that passes wisdom from teacher to student across the centuries, these final thoughts represent not just techniques and strategies, but a philosophy about how to live with both wisdom and compassion in a world where intentions are often hidden. The greatest revelation of my journey was not learning how to detect deception or manipulate others for advantage. It was discovering that the highest use of understanding human nature is helping people become the best versions of themselves. When you can see past someone's defensive behaviors to their underlying fears and genuine aspirations, you gain the power to support their growth rather than exploit their vulnerabilities. I think of all the relationships I built, all the conflicts I navigated, and all the strategic advantages I gained through these skills. But what I remember most clearly are the moments when understanding someone's true intentions allowed me to help them achieve something meaningful, to resolve a conflict peacefully, or to build trust where suspicion had previously existed. The responsibility that comes with these abilities cannot be overstated. When you can read people's hidden motivations and predict their behavior, you hold a form of power that can either elevate or diminish everyone around you. The choice you make about how to use this power defines not just your effectiveness, but your character. Throughout my life, I observed that the leaders who achieved the most lasting success were those who used their understanding of human nature. to build rather than destroy, to include rather than exclude, to empower rather than control. They saw through people's facades, not to judge them harshly, but to understand them completely enough to bring out their strengths and address their genuine concerns. This is why I emphasize that learning to read others must be paired with learning to read yourself. The same patterns of fear, ambition, and protective deception that you observe in others also operate within you. Honest self-awareness keeps you humble about your own motivations, while making you more compassionate about others' struggles. The connection between reading others and understanding yourself runs deeper than most people realize. As you become more skilled at seeing the gap between what people say and what they actually believe or intend, you also become more conscious of the gaps in your own authenticity. This awareness creates an opportunity for greater integrity in your own communications and relationships. My challenge to you is to use these skills as a foundation for becoming a better leader, friend, and person. When you understand what drives someone's difficult behavior, you can address their underlying needs rather than just responding to their surface actions. When you can see through defensive facades to genuine vulnerability, you can offer appropriate support rather than pushing harder against their resistance. The world needs people who can see clearly through human complexity while responding with wisdom and kindness. In your families, your workplaces, and your communities, there are countless opportunities to use these insights to heal misunderstandings, prevent conflicts, and help others achieve their potential. Remember that the greatest victory is not defeating someone who would deceive you. It's creating relationships so authentic and supportive that deception becomes unnecessary. When people feel genuinely understood and valued, their need for protective facades diminishes, and their authentic selves can emerge. Your path forward involves not just applying these techniques, but embodying the principles that make others want to be genuine with you. Be the kind of person whose integrity and understanding create safe spaces for truth. Build relationships that encourage authenticity rather than performance. As you develop these abilities, use them to make the world around you more honest, more trusting, and more compassionate. This is the legacy worthy of the wisdom you've received, not just personal success or protection from deception, but contributing to a human community where truth can flourish and people can connect authentically across all their differences. The Master's scroll passes from my hands to yours. Use this wisdom well, and one day you too will have insights worthy of sharing with those who seek to understand the beautiful complexity of human nature. The journey of understanding others and yourself begins now. Make it a journey that honors both the power and the responsibility of seeing clearly into the human heart.